Picture this. It's a closed meeting room. No cameras, no press, no speeches about innovation or freedom. Just government officials, central bankers, and defense advisors staring at the same question on a whiteboard. What if Bitcoin doesn't go away? That's the uncomfortable thought, quietly reshaping policy rooms around the world right now. Not because they love it, not because they trust it, but because ignoring it is starting to look reckless. And that's why governments are beginning to treat Bitcoin less like a curiosity and more like a strategic asset. This matters now because for the first time, Bitcoin isn't just surviving pressure, it's absorbing it. Bans, crashes, mockery, regulation, it keeps running, block after block, year after year. And systems that don't break under stress eventually attract attention from people whose entire job is to manage risk. Let's rewind. For most of its life, Bitcoin lived in a box labeled speculation. A weird internet token, a casino chip with memes. Governments could afford to dismiss it because the math was small. In 2013, Bitcoin was a rounding error. In 2017, it was a bubble. In 2020, it was an experiment. But quietly, something changed. Bitcoin didn't just grow in price. It grew in infrastructure, custody firms, regulated exchanges, derivatives markets, clearing systems. Most importantly, Bitcoin started plugging into the same pipes that move global capital. That's when it stopped being just a trade. It became a system. Here's the simple version of what governments see. Bitcoin is a network that runs 24/7, doesn't require permission, doesn't care who you are, and settles value globally without trusting anyone. That's not ideology. That's capability. And capabilities get studied, especially when they exist outside your control. Governments understand something most retail investors don't. Power isn't about price. It's about optionality. Gold isn't valuable because it's shiny. Oil isn't strategic because it's expensive. They matter because in a crisis, they still function. Bitcoin has quietly passed a similar test. During wars, sanctions, banking collapses, and currency controls, Bitcoin didn't freeze. It didn't close for the weekend. It didn't ask for approval. That's unsettling if you run a state. But it's also interesting, because here's the irony. The same governments that criticize Bitcoin for being volatile already hold assets that don't generate cash flow, don't have CEOs, and don't care about politics. They're called reserves. Gold reserves, foreign currency reserves, strategic commodities. These aren't investments, they're insurance. And Bitcoin is starting to behave like a new form of insurance. Not against inflation narratives. That's the hype. Against system failure. Now let's talk about the uncomfortable math. Bitcoin has a fixed supply. That part is famous. What's less discussed is distribution. Over 70% of Bitcoin hasn't moved in over a year. Large portions haven't moved in 5. That's not day traders. That's long-term holders. Institutions, funds, entities that don't panic easily. This creates something governments pay close attention to: supply rigidity. When demand rises in traditional markets, producers respond. More oil, more bonds, more currency. Bitcoin doesn't respond. There's no committee meeting, no emergency issuance, no temporary expansion. The schedule is mechanical, and it doesn't negotiate. From a government perspective, that's dangerous and fascinating at the same time. Dangerous because it can't be controlled. Fascinating because no one else can control it either. Now, layer geopolitics on top. Sanctions used to mean exclusion from the financial system. From SWIFT, from correspondent banks, from dollar clearing. But Bitcoin doesn't have a switch. That doesn't mean it replaces the dollar. That's fantasy. It means it exists outside the map. And any asset that exists outside the map becomes relevant in scenarios you don't put on press releases. This is why you're seeing a shift in tone. Not public endorsements, not official adoption announcements, just quiet moves. Allowing ETFs instead of banning ownership. Defining tax treatment instead of criminalizing usage. Studying mining instead of dismissing it. These are not signs of love. They're signs of acknowledgement. Here's where hype crashes into reality. Bitcoin is not replacing national currencies. It's not ending central banking. It's not overthrowing governments. What it is doing is inserting itself as a parallel system that can't be erased without extreme cost. And governments are very good at one thing: cost-benefit analysis. Banning Bitcoin outright pushes activity underground. Ignoring it leaves you unprepared. Engaging with it gives you visibility. Visibility equals leverage. That's the real strategy. If Bitcoin is going to exist anyway, it's better to understand it, monitor it, and integrate it at the edges than pretend it's a fad. Even hostile states don't destroy infrastructure they might need later. They map it, zoom out. For the first time in modern history, there is a globally liquid asset that is digital, is scarce, is bearer-based, and isn't issued by any state. That's unprecedented. Not utopian, not perfect, just unprecedented. And unprecedented things don't get ignored forever. They get absorbed into strategic thinking. The risk isn't that Bitcoin becomes too powerful. The risk is that it becomes normal. A background asset, a neutral rail, a line item in stress scenarios. When that happens, the conversation changes completely. Not, is Bitcoin legit? But, what happens if we don't hold any exposure at all? That's the question governments are now quietly asking. And the most uncomfortable part, they're asking it much later than they should have. So here's the unresolved thought. If states are starting to treat Bitcoin like insurance they hope never to use, what kind of future are they preparing for? Because you don't plan for fire extinguishers when everything is fine. You plan when you know, eventually, something burns.